My name is Peter Rowbotham, and the work I do is a geophysicist. I look to extract as much value from seismic data for characterizing the subsurface as possible.
Hello, my name is Andrew Gary, and welcome to Seismic Sound-Off in-depth conversations in applied geophysics. In this episode, I have a conversation with Peter Rowbotham on his recent paper, Investment in North Sea Seismic Leading to New Opportunities. Peter makes the case for investing in seismic data. He also shares why the beginning of a project is the most important and the context where seismic projects deliver the most value. We also discuss new versus legacy 3D surveys, why the beginning of a project is the most important, and more. Peter Rowbotham is a senior geophysical advisor, geoscience lead at Apache. Visit seg.org/podcast to find the links for Peter's paper and the rest of this special section on the North Sea in April's TLE. This episode is sponsored by Geospace Technologies. As the leading innovator and manufacturer of wireless seismic data acquisition systems, Geospace Technologies offers a series of seabed wireless seismic data acquisition systems designed for extended duration seabed seismic data acquisition. Geospace is committed to setting new standards for quality, performance, reliability, and cost savings to E&P companies and marine geophysical contractors. And now my conversation with Peter Rowbotham. Well, we're going to talk a lot about seismic data today, which I'm excited about. You published an article in April's The Leading Edge that is titled, Investment in North Sea Seismic Leading to New Opportunities. Why did you set out to write this particular paper?
Oh, well, a simple answer. I was approached. I was asked. Here in the North Sea, well, certainly in the UK, we all know each other. So it's a fairly small community. Ourselves here in the UK and in Norway, Netherlands, the other North Sea countries, I think we've got a good sharing network. We've met at various conferences, etc. So once approached, I sort of sat back and thought, okay, what would be interesting to share? What aspects of what we do would be kind of different or enlightening for the leading edge readership? And so that formed the basis of the paper as we started to put it together.
Yeah, and the first part of that title is investment. So let's kind of start there. Why is it important to invest in seismic data?
Sure. Well, we are all within the SEG. We're all geophysical enthusiasts. We're all seismic enthusiasts. And, for us, it's obvious that, we need to shoot more seismic, process more seismic, really push the seismic as far as we can. But when it comes down to the business side of it, we do have to put together the business proposition for the commercial side of our business. What is it about this new activity or revisiting an old activity? What is it that actually derives the business value? And so that was, the sort of basis for the paper, showing that there are opportunities out there, even in a very mature basin like the North Sea. There are plenty of opportunities to invest, to create better seismic data to address the business questions of the organizations that we work for.
Yeah, and speaking of investment, what does investment in seismic data look like?
It's multifaceted. Let me just sort of set the groundwork. In the paper, I emphasize that for the North Sea, we're not talking about a new 3D seismic acquisition in an area that has never been surveyed before. We're not in that situation. We've covered, back in the 1970s and 1980s, everything was covered with 2D seismic. Late 80s, 90s and onwards, we've shot 3D seismic. So wherever you look, there will be an existing 3D seismic volume. And some of the contractor companies have brought together historical surveys and merged them together, and those are available as off-the-shelf products. However, in that context, so investment means Do we need to acquire a new 3D seismic? What technology has developed since the previous acquisition that would allow us to derive more benefit from that seismic? So that's one part of investment, new acquisition. A second investment could be purchasing the latest data that a spec company, a multi-client survey company has acquired. Or a third aspect could be reprocessing an existing or a legacy 3D data set to derive the benefit of more recent processing technology developments. So 3 aspects there.
Yeah, we're going to look a little more in depth at that first aspect in a minute. But in what context do you see seismic projects delivering the most value to companies as well as to geoscientists?
I remember in the past, there was an analysis done of where does 4D seismic deliver the most value. So I'm talking specifically about time-lapse seismic. And the analysis showed that, yes, the 4D seismic will give you an uplift on drilling a particular well, or it'll de-risk something, or it'll give you a better picture of what the reservoir model should be doing. But the greatest value came from surprises. The greatest value was when we thought we knew something, we thought we understood how the reservoir was behaving during production, and suddenly we saw something completely different by acquiring the 4D seismic. And I think that surprise element is also relevant for 3D seismic as well. With all this great 3D seismic data, we think, oh yeah, we can easily map out the subsurface. But for example, we give examples of injectite imaging, which just by doing a reprocessing, we're able to image in their sort of complex 3D geometry much better with the same acquired data set, but just with the latest reprocessing.
In what ways have you seen the quality requirements and use of seismic data evolve throughout the North Sea project?
Let me focus my answer on the 4D seismic that we've been acquiring over the Forties field. And here, Apache acquired the Forties field from BP back in 2003. And with that, also the rich legacy of both 4D seismic as a tool for reservoir management, and also the AVO inversion, the pre-stack inversion methodology that BP had developed. So when Apache took it on in 2003, they were able to straight away utilize the methodologies that had been developed. Since then, I would say that we've gone from strength to strength. So in terms of the 4D seismic, there have been 5 more acquisitions acquiring a time-lapse seismic monitor dataset. And with each of these, we've learned how to improve the acquisitions every time, both in terms of making sure the source and receiver repeatability, positioning repeatability are as close as possible, but also making sure that we get as much bang for our buck, increasing the areas surrounding the Forties field that get covered by 3D seismic whilst we're acquiring the 4D seismic lines. Separately, I mentioned the pre-stack inversion, and I would say for that, yes, we've on every phase of repeating the inversion, we improve every time. We get a better calibration against the wells. We get more confidence, more trust in that seismic inversion product. And that's been very satisfying, seeing how we're standing on the shoulders of giants, but we're taking it to the next level incrementally every time we come back to look for improvements.
Kind of going back to looking at investment in seismic data, how would you approach deciding whether to acquire a new 3D seismic survey or just utilize and reprocess a legacy 3D survey for a particular area?
Well, the first question becomes, well, how good is legacy seismic data? During the last couple of decades, there's been a strong technological development into broader band seismic data. So with emphasis on the lower frequencies within the bandwidth. So we've got a fairly good idea of the age of a survey and therefore the likely quality of that data for applying a new enhanced reprocessing sequence. But if it's a recent survey and if it has been acquired either in a broadband way or we have the ability to increase the bandwidth, we will look at the cost differential between an acquisition and the latest processing or just a reprocessing exercise and make that judgment based on what the technical and business objectives behind the decision are going to be.
Why do you believe that the beginning of a project is the most important?
I think getting stakeholder involvement right at the start of a project and understanding all of the relationships between the business objectives and the potential technical objectives, getting those out in the open right at the start ensures that all stakeholders buy into a project. The worst situation to be in would be to have invested a lot of time and effort in a project to find a fatal flaw which could and should have been identified very early on. So I think it creates a much more energetic project environment as well. If people are all aligned, they all appreciate, we've got a clear goal, we've got a clear objective, this is what we're working towards. It's likely to be a much more successful project and delivering on time, on budget, etc., etc. So it's, I think we can all reflect back on those projects we've worked on in the past. And, I bet our favorite projects are those that were kind of well defined from the start. We knew why we were doing something and what we were going to deliver.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And kind of a part of a beginning of a lot of projects is the contract phase. And, I imagine there might be a lot of technical geoscientists that kind of may just not think too much about this part of a project. What can technical geoscientists contribute to the contract phase of a seismic project?
I find being technical enthusiasts, we might not be that keen to get into deep diving into the paperwork and the horribly thick contract documents that sometimes get generated. But what I've found in my role is that it is a very good idea to look through every piece of information that, let's say we're doing a tender exercise. What are the vendors offering? Why are they offering certain technology, not other technology? And I would suggest that, assuming that someone else is looking at a particular page and asking questions about that page is not necessarily the case. There is no such thing as a stupid question when it comes to contracting. I'm sure we're all guilty of this. Sometimes in contracts we find phrases and words that have just been copied and pasted year after year after year and are completely irrelevant to the work that we're trying to do. So I'm a fan of keeping everything as simple as possible. The more simple it is, the more clear it is, the more likely you're going to have a successful project and a successful interaction between the vendors and the company, the customers for a project.
Yeah, that probably feeds directly into what you're talking about just simply having clear objectives. If that contract is also clear, that's going to help make everyone know what the deliverables are at the end of the day. During the processing phase, why do you advocate for obtaining interim volumes at every opportunity?
There's two prime reasons for that. So obviously, we would like to see the progress, the improvements brought by a particular stage of the processing flow. That could be done, with just a PowerPoint comparison. However, as soon as you slip back to PowerPoints, you are reliant on the color bar, the scale range of whoever created that image. And what I've found is that we, in the companies with the interpreters and their own preferred color bars, can often sort of spot precise details that wouldn't necessarily be apparent either to myself, say, as the running the project from our company side, or the processing contractors. So I think receiving interim volumes, loading them up into our systems, looking at favorite seismic lines, areas where we know there's a problem, or looking through a particular well to see how the calibration has improved compared to the previous step of the processing. I think these are invaluable. Rather than sort of waiting until you get an end product, you receive the final SegWi volumes, you load them up to the system, and then the interpreters express disappointment that it's not what they were expecting.
Due to space and the leading edge, you had to be brief in distilling some of these key seismic lessons you're sharing. Now that you have a little bit more space, is there anything in particular you would like to expand on?
Well, one aspect that I had to be brief on was the acquisition of our Forties seismic datasets. I was very pleased to be able to share photographs that were taken from the seismic vessels during one of our undershoot operations past some of the platforms. But the thing that struck me about that operation was how smoothly it went, with no HSE incidents. This was the operation in 2020, the summer of 2020. The photos show a nice sunny day and a smooth, calm sea, but let me say it wasn't always like that, and there were some unseasonably strong winds and large wave heights. And my admiration for the operational crews on the vessels, keeping such a safe operation and acquiring such high quality data. I hope I pointed at that in the paper, but it's something that I had to leave quite brief.
That's wonderful that there were no incidents. What recent innovation or new technique for seismic data are you most inspired by right now?
During the reprocessing efforts on the Beryl dataset, we've employed FWI. Everyone's talking about FWI, full waveform inversion. We've employed it for improving the velocity model, for speeding up the derivation of the velocity model. So I think we're at a point now where FWI is the standard there. We have run tests of doing LSM, or least squares migration. When we've done tests with various contractors, we found it very, very interesting, but it wasn't something in the end that we employed on the Beryl dataset. So looking forward, I think it would be interesting to see how that could be made more efficient, and LSM is brought forward to become the standard. And I think one of the barriers for us was the time and therefore budget required for that. This should reduce in the future as compute resources continue to expand. So in terms of what I'm excited about for, say, 5 years' time, it would be, the standard application of LSM.
Well, something to look forward there. And lastly here, what principle, teaching, or point of view has helped you succeed in your field?
I've had a lot of good advice from senior people as I've worked through my career. A lot of the points I make in the paper are not necessarily my original advice. I've sort of taken the advice I've received through my career and distilled it down for the messages that I'd like to sort of pass on to the next generation.
Standing on the shoulders of giants, as you mentioned, and now you're contributing to that for the next wave of geoscientists. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to write this article and sharing these lessons and talking with us a little bit more about those lessons from that article.
Okay, it's been my pleasure and a very interesting conversation. Thank you, Andrew.
SEG produces Seismic Sound Off to benefit its members, the scientific community, and inform the public on the value of geophysics. To show your support for this show, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Simply go to Seismic Sound Off on Apple Podcasts and Spotify on your phone. It takes less than 5 seconds to leave a 5-star rating and is the #1 action you can take to show your appreciation for this free resource. And follow the podcast while you are on the app to be notified when each new episode releases. Original music created by Zach Bridges. This episode was hosted, edited, and produced by me, Andrew Gary at 51 Features. The SEG podcast team is Jennifer Cobb, Kathy Gamble, and Allie McGinnis. Thank you for listening. This is Seismic Sound Off, signaling off.